In America, in the autumn of 1929, well-dressed men who were millionaires on paper just days before suddenly stood in long, silent breadlines, waiting for a bowl of watery soup to keep from starving. Billions of dollars in wealth vanished into thin air. Stock exchanges went into a death spiral, banks closed their doors by the thousands, and a nation that believed its prosperity would last forever was plunged into total economic darkness. This is the story of the greatest economic collapse in modern history, the Wall Street crash of 1929 and the Great Depression. And it's told through the eyes of one ordinary man who played by the rules of the booming 20s and lost everything. In the mid-1920s, America was riding an unprecedented wave of optimism. Following World War I, industrial production soared, skyscrapers pierced the clouds, and consumer goods flooded the market. At the heart of this excitement was the stock market. By 1928 and 1929, Wall Street had become a national obsession. Everyone from factory workers to wealthy industrialists believed stock prices would climb forever. The secret fuel behind the boom was buying on margin. Investors could purchase stocks with as little as 10% down, borrowing the rest from brokers. As long as prices kept rising, the machine printed paper fortunes out of thin air. In Chicago, Illinois, lived a 38-year-old factory machinist named Walter Higgins. He worked long hours at an automotive parts plant, earning a modest, steady wage to support his wife Clara and their young daughter. Walter was a prudent, hard-working family man. But by early 1929, the roaring stock market fever had reached the factory floor. Co-workers whispered about easy riches, and newspapers declared that everyone could be rich. Enticed by the prospect of securing a better future for his family, Walter took his small lifetime savings, opened a brokerage account, and even borrowed a modest margin loan to buy shares in industrial companies. For a few months, Walter watched his portfolio grow faster than his annual factory salary. It felt like magic. But beneath the surface, the American economy was already slowing down, as overproduction met exhausted consumer credit. Then came October 24th, 1929, Black Thursday. Stock prices suddenly plummeted as panic selling erupted on Wall Street. Millions of shares were dumped in frantic confusion as brokers issued desperate margin calls. Just days later, on October 29th, Black Tuesday, the dam completely broke. A record 16 million shares were traded as the market suffered a catastrophic collapse, wiping out fortunes in hours. Walter received the dreaded telegram from his broker on a cold Tuesday afternoon. His stocks had lost 70% of their value, and he needed to cover his margin loan immediately or face total liquidation. He didn't have the cash. His broker automatically sold every share he owned at rock-bottom prices, leaving Walter not with zero, but drowning in massive debts he couldn't possibly repay. And Walter's nightmare was just the beginning. The stock market crash was merely the spark that ignited a much deeper, systemic fire across the entire American economy. As panic swept from Wall Street to Main Street, ordinary Americans lost faith in the banking system. Fearing their life savings would vanish, millions rushed to withdraw their money, all at once. Because banks kept only a fraction of their deposits in cash, they quickly ran out. Thousands of banks collapsed across the country, wiping out the life savings of 9 million families in a matter of months. Walter's local bank went under overnight. The family's emergency savings, every cent they had carefully stored away, evaporated into nothingness, leaving them unable to pay rent or buy groceries. By 1932, the American economy had ground to a halt. industrial production plunged by nearly 50%, and unemployment skyrocketed to an unimaginable 25% nationwide. Walter's factory finally closed its gates permanently. Along with millions of other American workers, he found himself jobless, walking the streets for hours each day searching for any work that didn't exist. Shanty towns, dubbed Hoovervilles, sprang up in public parks across every major city, constructed from scrap wood, cardboard, and tin, temporary homes for families evicted from their houses. That bitter winter, standing in line for a handout of bread and soup, Walter finally understood. The boundless prosperity of the 20s had been built on a mountain of speculative debt and fragile illusions. The American dream felt broken. Trust in banks, corporations, and political leaders shattered completely, leaving an entire generation marked by deep financial caution and psychological scars. In March 1933, President Franklin D. Roosevelt took office and immediately launched the New Deal, sweeping federal reforms, emergency bank holidays, and the creation of the FDIC to guarantee bank deposits. Public works programs like the WPA provided jobs for millions of idle men, building roads, bridges, and parks. Slowly, public confidence returned, and the banking system began the long climb back to stability. Walter eventually found steady work through a federal public works project, later returning to manufacturing as the economy mobilized for World War II. But he never bought another stock in his life. He taught his children a timeless lesson. Never gamble with money you cannot afford to lose, and never trust that a financial boom will last forever. Real security comes from savings you can touch and hard work you can control. Walter's story teaches a lesson that remains completely vital nearly a century later. Speculative manias and easy credit can blind a society to underlying economic realities until the bubble bursts. Whenever asset prices detach entirely from economic fundamentals and leverage reaches extreme heights, a reckoning is inevitable. History doesn't repeat itself, but it often rhymes. The practical takeaway isn't to avoid all investing or fear progress. It's this: managing leverage, diversifying risk, and understanding the fragility of debt-fueled booms is the only true shield against financial ruin. Walter Higgins never recovered his lost savings from the 1929 crash, but the story of the Great Depression became the foundational case study of modern economics, teaching central banks and investors lessons that still protect the global economy today. If you could travel back to 1929, what would you have done differently? Leave a comment below, and don't forget to subscribe for more surprising true stories from economic history.